Ladies and gentlemen, we often underestimate the most powerful voice in our lives, the one inside our own heads. Every day, from the moment we wake up until the moment we fall asleep, we are engaged in an ongoing conversation with ourselves. But here's the truth. Most of us are not aware of how damaging or empowering that conversation can be. Now imagine this for just 21 days. You commit to changing that dialogue. 21 days where you choose to talk to yourself as if you were someone you deeply respected, someone you wanted to encourage, someone whose potential you believed in. Why 21 days? Because habits form with repetition. Neuroscience tells us that consistent action reshapes patterns in the brain. And by speaking to ourselves differently, even for 3 short weeks, we begin to rewire not just our thinking, but our behaviors, our confidence, and ultimately our outcomes. So how do we talk to ourselves differently? It's not about empty affirmations or pretending everything is fine. It's about honesty combined with compassion. It's telling yourself, I am allowed to make mistakes, but I am not defined by them. I will focus on progress, not perfection. I can choose courage over comfort. When you commit to this kind of self-talk, something incredible happens. Your inner critic begins to lose its grip, and your inner coach begins to take the lead. The voice that once held you back now becomes the same voice that pushes you forward. For 21 days, I invite you to try this challenge. Each morning, set the tone by asking yourself one empowering question. What do I need to say to myself today to move forward with confidence? And each evening, close the day by reminding yourself of one thing you did well, no matter how small. Do this consistently, and you will see the difference. In 3 weeks, you won't just be someone who tried a challenge. You'll be someone who started to lead themselves with clarity, compassion, and courage. And that is the foundation for leading others and for living with purpose. Thank you. 5 keynotes of the speech. The voice inside your head is the most powerful influence in your life. 21 days of intentional self-talk can rewire thought patterns and behaviors. Effective self-talk is rooted in honesty, compassion, and encouragement, not blind positivity. Replacing the inner critic with an inner coach leads to growth and confidence. Daily practice of empowering questions and affirmations builds lasting transformation. The voice inside your head is the most powerful influence in your life. We often think the biggest impact on who we are comes from the people around us, the circumstances we face, or the opportunities we either get or miss. And while all of those do play a role, none of them are as consistent or as immediate as the voice that speaks to us every single day, our own. From the moment you wake up, before you've had a conversation with anyone else, you've already had several with yourself. You've thought about whether you feel motivated, whether you look good enough, whether you're capable of handling what's ahead. And in those fleeting moments, you've either encouraged yourself or you've dragged yourself down. That inner dialogue shapes your emotions, your decisions, and the energy you carry into the world. Think about how you speak to others. If someone you cared about made a mistake, you might tell them it's okay. That mistakes are part of learning and that they should keep going. But when you make a mistake yourself, how often is the message different? How often do you hear a voice that says, you're not good enough, you always mess things up, you're never going to get this right? That difference reveals how powerful self-talk can be. We are quick to extend kindness and encouragement outward, but slow to direct it inward. Over time, that imbalance matters. Because if the loudest, most constant voice in your life is critical, harsh, or doubtful, it shapes the way you see yourself and eventually the way you show up in the world. The brain is designed to listen to repetition. What you tell yourself again and again becomes a belief, and that belief quietly dictates your behavior. If your inner dialogue is filled with statements like, I'm not ready, I can't do this, or I'm not the type of person who succeeds, your actions will align with that belief. You won't try, or if you do, you won't give your best effort because you've already convinced yourself of the outcome. On the other hand, when the voice inside you says, I am learning, I am capable of figuring this out, or I don't have to be perfect to make progress, you create a completely different set of possibilities. You're not denying challenges. You're reframing them in a way that gives you agency rather than stripping it away. There's also a psychological ripple effect. The way you talk to yourself doesn't just affect your own experience. It shapes the way you treat others. If you constantly criticize yourself, it becomes natural to be critical of others. If you allow yourself no room for mistakes, you may struggle to give others grace when they stumble. But when your self-talk is built on patience, compassion, and belief in growth, that naturally extends outward. You become the kind of person who inspires, who encourages, and who builds others up because you are already practicing that with yourself. The most important part of this influence is that it is always present. You can't escape the voice in your head. Even if you're in a quiet room, even if no one is speaking, your thoughts are running. That constancy makes it more powerful than external influences because it's the one you hear the most. Even if someone praises you, if your inner voice is dismissive, you won't fully accept it. If someone criticizes you and your inner voice is already cruel, you'll magnify it 10 times over. But if your inner voice is grounded and constructive, outside noise has less power. Praise won't inflate you into arrogance, and criticism won't crush you into despair. You become more resilient because you're not outsourcing your identity to others. You're grounding it in the way you consistently speak to yourself. There's also a practical layer to this influence. Self-talk directs focus. When you're about to give a presentation and you say to yourself, I'm going to embarrass myself, I always mess this up, your brain immediately scans for evidence to confirm that fear. You'll notice every stutter, every moment of nervousness, and you'll ignore the parts that went well. But if your inner voice says, I might be nervous, but I've prepared and I can do this step by step, your brain focuses on the effort and progress, not just the flaws. That shift in focus changes the entire experience, even if the situation is the same. The only difference is the voice you chose to listen to. What makes this so significant is that it is entirely within your control. You may not be able to change every circumstance, and you cannot control what other people say or think about you, but you can always decide how you speak to yourself. It requires awareness, because most of the time self-talk happens automatically without us noticing. But once you begin to pay attention, you can catch the moments where you are tearing yourself down and choose instead to build yourself up. It doesn't mean lying to yourself or pretending everything is perfect. It means being realistic but constructive, the way you would be with someone you truly wanted to see succeed. The voice inside your head is your constant companion, your most loyal critic, or your most supportive coach. Over a lifetime, it will influence your choices more than any single person you ever meet. And because of that, it deserves your attention, your care, and your intention. The way you talk to yourself today sets the foundation for how you will act tomorrow. And ultimately, for the life you will build. 21 days of intentional self-talk can rewire thought patterns and behaviors. The idea may sound simple at first, but it is grounded in a deep understanding of how the brain functions and how habits are formed. Human beings are creatures of repetition. Our brains are designed to seek patterns, to repeat familiar loops, and to conserve energy by sticking to what feels automatic. This is why so much of what we do, think and feel is a reflection of unconscious habits rather than deliberate choices. When you introduce intentional self-talk into your life, you are essentially disrupting old loops and creating new ones. And by practicing this deliberately for 21 days, you give your brain enough consistent evidence to begin building new neural pathways that can eventually become your default mode of thinking. When we talk about rewiring thought patterns, it's important to understand that our brains respond to what we repeatedly feed them. Negative self-talk doesn't just stay as words in the air. It becomes encoded as beliefs. If every time you face a challenge you tell yourself, I can't do this, your brain begins to associate challenges with fear, doubt, and avoidance. The neural connections that fire in those moments strengthen each time until they become the default reaction. But if you replace those words with something more constructive, like, this is difficult, but I am capable of learning, you are essentially training your brain to form new associations. Over time, the connections around resilience and problem solving become stronger, while the ones around fear and avoidance weaken. The 21-day period matters because repetition over several weeks gives these new connections a chance to stabilize. There is a scientific concept called neuroplasticity, which refers to the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new connections. This ability doesn't end in childhood. It continues throughout life. Every thought you repeat and every word you speak to yourself is like a tiny drop of water carving into stone. At first, it feels insignificant. One drop doesn't change anything. But over time, drop after drop, the stone begins to reshape. The same is true for our minds. One positive phrase may feel like it has no effect, but when repeated daily, consistently for 21 days, it begins to reshape how the brain interprets experiences. Consider how powerful it is when you shift the tone of your internal dialogue. Imagine waking up for 21 mornings in a row, and instead of thinking, I'm too tired, I don't want to do this, you intentionally say, I have the energy to take one step today. Or after making a mistake, instead of defaulting to, I always mess things up, you practice saying, this mistake is part of my growth. These small, deliberate changes do not instantly erase the old patterns, but they start layering new ones over them. Day by day, they create a fresh internal script. After 3 weeks, your brain begins to adopt the new script more automatically because it has been rehearsed enough times to feel natural. What makes this challenge transformative is not just the positive words themselves, but the act of consistency. Doing something once or twice is not enough to rewire a pattern. It requires steady commitment. For 21 days, you are not just practicing new phrases. You are teaching your brain a new rhythm. You are demonstrating to yourself that you are in control of the way you think, that you are capable of redirecting your inner voice. That sense of agency is powerful. It creates a ripple effect in your behavior because thoughts always precede actions. When you think differently, you show up differently. Behaviors are the natural extension of thought patterns. If you convince yourself for 3 weeks that you are not defined by your mistakes, you will begin to take more risks. You will attempt projects you might otherwise avoid, because your self-talk has redefined failure as part of the journey rather than proof of inadequacy. If you practice telling yourself, I am capable of learning, for 21 days, your behavior will start reflecting more openness to challenges, more patience with setbacks, and more willingness to try again. The words you repeat become a kind of instruction manual for your actions. Over time, they no longer feel like forced affirmations, but truths you live by. The 21-day period also serves as a bridge between intention and identity. In the beginning, the words may feel awkward, as though you're pretending. But with repetition, They stop being just something you say and start becoming something you believe. By the end of 3 weeks, many people notice subtle shifts: less hesitation, less harsh self-criticism, more focus, more energy to act. Those shifts may seem small at first, but they are the early signs of deeper change. Thought patterns that once held you back begin to weaken, while new behaviors rooted in confidence and self-compassion start to take root. It is easy to underestimate how much impact 21 days can have, but when you realize that each day contains hundreds of moments of self-talk, the scale becomes clear. Over 3 weeks, you are giving your brain thousands of opportunities to rehearse new patterns. Each repetition is like a vote for the kind of person you want to become. The brain listens, adapts, and eventually follows. This is why 21 days of intentional self-talk can truly rewire thought patterns and behaviors. It is not magic, it is biology. It is the consistent choice to replace self-defeating dialogue with empowering words until the new becomes familiar and the familiar becomes second nature. Effective self-talk is rooted in honesty, compassion, and encouragement, not blind positivity. Many people hear the idea of self-talk and immediately think of repeating cheerful slogans in the mirror, saying things like, "I am the best," or "everything will work out perfectly." While these phrases may sound uplifting, they often do more harm than good if they don't align with your reality. The human brain is quick to detect when words are hollow. If you are struggling, overwhelmed, or facing setbacks, telling yourself that everything is fine doesn't build resilience. It creates dissonance. You feel like you're lying to yourself, and instead of finding strength in the words, you dismiss them as unrealistic. That is why effective self-talk has to be grounded in truth. It must acknowledge where you are, while also guiding you toward where you want to be. Honesty is the foundation. Without honesty, self-talk becomes denial, and denial doesn't help growth. If you failed at something, telling yourself that wasn't a failure isn't honest, and your brain knows it. But saying, "Yes, I failed at this attempt, but failure is part of learning and I can take something from this," is both true and constructive. It allows you to face reality without being crushed by it. Honesty creates credibility in your internal dialogue, so when you speak to yourself, you can believe the words. That belief is what gives them power. If you cannot trust your own self-talk, it won't influence your thoughts or behavior in meaningful ways. Compassion is what makes honesty sustainable. Honesty without compassion can easily turn into self-criticism. If you only tell yourself the truth without kindness, you risk reinforcing negative cycles. For example, if you made a mistake and all you say is, "I wasn't good enough, I failed here," that may be true, but it isn't compassionate. Compassion reframes the same truth in a supportive way. "I didn't perform at my best, but doesn't mean I can't improve next time." Compassion means speaking to yourself the way you would to a close friend you care about. It is not about excusing your mistakes or lowering standards. It is about creating an environment where mistakes become stepping stones instead of walls. A compassionate tone prevents you from giving up and instead keeps you engaged in growth. Encouragement ties it together. Encouragement means reminding yourself of your ability to try again, of the progress you've already made, and of your inherent capacity to grow. It's the spark that keeps you moving forward when honesty and compassion alone might still leave you standing still. For example, after a challenging day, encouragement sounds like, "Today was tough, but I showed up and I can keep going tomorrow." This isn't blind optimism. It's a deliberate choice to highlight effort and potential rather than only focusing on shortcomings. Encouragement trains your brain to search for what is possible instead of what is impossible. The danger of blind positivity is that it skips these three elements. It avoids honesty, ignores compassion, and inflates encouragement into something unrealistic. Saying everything will be perfect is not the same as saying things are difficult, but I'm strong enough to handle what comes next. The former dismisses reality. The latter embraces it while inspiring action. People often abandon self-talk practices because they tried blind positivity, felt disconnected from the words, and concluded the method didn't work. But the problem wasn't self-talk itself. It was the lack of balance between truth, kindness, and motivation. Real self-talk has to be lived, not forced. When you are honest, you give yourself clarity. When you add compassion, you give yourself permission to keep trying. And when you bring in encouragement, you build momentum. Together, these elements create a dialogue that is sustainable, believable, and transformative. Over time, they form a voice that doesn't just cheer you on when life is easy, but supports you when life is messy. That is the kind of voice that rewires patterns and sustains change. The most powerful thing about this approach is that it trains resilience. Life will never be free from struggle or failure, but when your inner voice is built on honesty, compassion, and encouragement, you are prepared to face those struggles. Instead of spiraling into negativity or trying to cover up reality with false positivity, you can acknowledge difficulty while still moving forward. This balance is what keeps you grounded and capable of growth no matter what happens around you. Your self-talk is not about pretending life is perfect. It is about reminding yourself you are capable of facing life as it is. That capability grows when your words are honest enough to be trusted, compassionate enough to be healing, and encouraging enough to be motivating. These three qualities together form the heart of effective self-talk, the kind that not only uplifts you but also equips you to act, learn, and keep building the life you want. Replacing the inner critic with an inner coach leads to growth and confidence. Every person carries an internal voice that comments on their actions, decisions, and potential. For many, that voice takes the shape of a critic, harsh, unforgiving, and relentless. The inner critic points out every flaw, magnifies every mistake, and often convinces us that we are less capable than we truly are. While it may have developed as a way to protect us from risk or embarrassment, over time it becomes a barrier to growth. Living with a dominant inner critic means living with hesitation, self-doubt, and fear of failure. But when that voice is reshaped into an inner coach, the entire relationship with oneself changes. The same moments of struggle or challenge become opportunities to learn, improve, and keep moving forward. The voice no longer tears down, it builds up, guides, and supports. The inner critic tends to speak in absolutes. It says things like, "You always fail, you never get this right," or "You're not the type of person who can succeed." These statements are rarely accurate, yet they feel powerful because they are repeated so often. Over time, the brain starts to believe them, and behavior follows belief. If you believe you always fail, you may stop trying. If you believe you never get it right, you may stop learning. The critic limits possibility because it frames failure as the end of the road instead of a part of the journey. The inner coach, however, speaks differently. It still acknowledges mistakes, but it frames them as temporary and instructive. Instead of saying, "You failed," the coach says, "This didn't work. What can I learn from it?" Instead of saying, "You're not good enough," the coach says, "You're still growing, and growth takes time." The coach doesn't ignore shortcomings, but it doesn't let them define identity. It uses them as fuel to push forward. This shift in language has a profound effect on confidence. When you believe mistakes are a natural part of learning, you become more willing to take risks, more open to new experiences, and more resilient in the face of setbacks. Confidence is not the absence of fear or failure. It is the willingness to act despite them, and that willingness grows when the voice in your head supports rather than sabotages. Transitioning from critic to coach requires practice, because for many people, the critic has been in control for years. The key is awareness. You have to notice when the critic speaks, catch the patterns in its language, and then consciously choose a new response. If the critic says, "You can't do this," the coach responds, "You may not be able to do it perfectly right now, but you can learn." At first, this feels deliberate and effortful, but with repetition, it becomes more natural. Over time, the coach's voice grows stronger while the critic's influence weakens. This is how the brain rewires, through repeated choice. Replacing the critic with the coach doesn't mean silencing all doubt or discomfort. A coach doesn't tell you everything is easy. A good coach challenges you, pushes you to improve, and holds you accountable, but always with the belief that you are capable. That is the crucial difference. The critic uses challenge as proof of inadequacy, while the coach uses challenge as proof of opportunity. When your inner voice takes on the qualities of a coach, you stop seeing obstacles as walls and start seeing them as hurdles you can practice jumping over. Each attempt, whether successful or not, becomes progress. The impact of this shift extends beyond internal feelings. When you cultivate an inner coach, your external behavior changes. You approach tasks with more curiosity instead of fear. You engage with others more openly because you are not as preoccupied with judgment. You recover faster from setbacks because the voice in your head reminds you that setbacks are temporary. This creates a feedback loop. Your confidence leads to action, your action leads to progress, and your progress reinforces confidence. The coach doesn't just change how you think, it changes how you live. The transformation also influences relationships. People who live with a dominant inner critic often project that same criticism onto others, judging them harshly or being impatient with their mistakes. But when you learn to replace your critic with a coach, you naturally extend the same supportive mindset to those around you. You become someone who encourages, who believes in potential, and who inspires others to keep trying. Just as a coach on a team lifts players up, your inner coach equips you to lift others. That ripple effect can change the culture of a workplace, a family, or a community. At its core, replacing the inner critic with an inner coach is about reclaiming control over the most important relationship you will ever have, the one with yourself. When that relationship is governed by criticism, it breeds insecurity and limitation. When it is guided by coaching, it breeds growth and confidence. Every challenge you face becomes an opportunity to practice this shift. Each time you notice the critic speaking, you have the chance to choose a new response, to guide yourself with encouragement and belief. With time, the critic's voice fades into the background, and the coach becomes your steady companion, reminding you that you are capable, resilient, and always in the process of becoming stronger. Daily practice of empowering questions and affirmations builds lasting transformation. The words you speak to yourself are not random. They are a reflection of the questions you ask and the beliefs you choose to reinforce. Most people underestimate how much their inner dialogue shapes their daily actions. They assume thoughts come and go without much influence, but in reality, every thought plants a seed. A question asked in the morning can guide the choices of the entire day. An affirmation repeated at night can shape the way you view yourself when you wake up again. That is why daily practice matters. Occasional motivation may give you a boost, but it is consistency, showing up for yourself every single day, that creates real change. Empowering questions are powerful because they direct the brain's attention. The human mind is designed to seek answers. When you ask yourself, "Why am I always failing?" your brain will look for evidence of failure, scanning through your past and focusing only on mistakes. But when you ask, what can I learn from this? Or what small step can I take today to move forward? The brain shifts into problem-solving mode. Instead of gathering proof that you are incapable, it gathers options, solutions, and opportunities. The quality of your inner questions shapes the quality of your outcomes. A disempowering question limits you, while an empowering one expands your possibilities. Practicing this daily means training your brain to look for progress instead of problems, growth instead of gaps. Affirmations work in a similar way, but rather than directing focus, they reinforce identity. An affirmation is a statement of belief, something you remind yourself of until it begins to feel true. When you say to yourself, I am learning every day, you are not pretending you have mastered everything, you are reinforcing the identity of a learner. When you say, I am resilient, you are not denying that challenges are difficult, you are affirming that you are the kind of person who can withstand difficulty. These small, repeated reminders gradually replace old, limiting beliefs with new, empowering ones. Over time, the words stop feeling like something you are forcing yourself to believe and begin to feel like part of who you are. The daily practice of combining empowering questions and affirmations creates a rhythm of self-leadership. Each morning, an empowering question sets the tone. How can I make progress today? What do I need to focus on to move forward? What is one thing I can be grateful for right now? These questions shift the brain's focus from passivity to possibility. They remind you that you are not stuck, you have choices. Then affirmations carry you through the day. I am capable of handling challenges. I am not defined by setbacks. I am moving forward one step at a time. At night, you can close the loop with another question. What did I do well today? Or what can I carry into tomorrow? This structure doesn't take much time, but when repeated daily, it builds a new internal framework. Transformation through this practice is lasting because it works at the level of identity, not just behavior. Many people try to change their lives by focusing on actions alone, but without changing the beliefs that drive those actions, the results don't stick. Empowering questions reshape the way you interpret experiences, and affirmations reshape the way you see yourself. Together, they change not just what you do, but who you believe yourself to be. When your identity shifts, your actions follow naturally and the change becomes sustainable. You are no longer pushing yourself against resistance. You are living in alignment with the person you've been telling yourself you are. The effect of this daily practice is also cumulative. One day of asking better questions won't dramatically change your life. 1 week of repeating affirmations may feel awkward. But over 21 days, 30 days, 60 days, the results compound. Just as negative self-talk repeated for years can create deep insecurity, empowering self-talk repeated daily can create unshakable confidence. Each day is like adding a small deposit into a mental bank account. At first, the deposits feel small, but as they accumulate, the balance grows into something significant. Eventually, you draw from that account in moments of difficulty. You have stored resilience, belief, and clarity that you can lean on when you need it most. What makes daily practice so important is that it doesn't depend on perfect conditions. You don't need to wait for inspiration, success, or motivation to show up. You simply commit to showing up for yourself every day, even when you don't feel like it. That discipline is what creates momentum. The very act of choosing to ask yourself an empowering question or repeat an affirmation in a difficult moment proves to yourself that you have agency. You are no longer at the mercy of circumstances or moods. You are actively shaping the way you think. This practice also helps create resilience in the face of setbacks. When something goes wrong, the critic in your mind may say, "This always happens to me." But if you have trained yourself to ask empowering questions, your immediate response can become, what can I learn from this and how do I move forward? That shift prevents you from spiraling and allows you to recover faster. Similarly, affirmations remind you that one mistake does not erase your progress. They anchor you in a bigger story of growth and resilience rather than a single moment of failure. Over time, the daily rhythm of questions and affirmations becomes part of who you are. It no longer feels like a tool you are using. It feels like your natural way of thinking. That is when transformation becomes lasting. You stop waiting for external validation because you have built a steady source of encouragement within yourself. You stop fearing challenges because your brain has been trained to look for solutions instead of problems. And you stop doubting your worth because you have reminded yourself of it every single day. This is why daily practice matters. It turns fleeting motivation into permanent mindset, and mindset is what shapes the trajectory of a life. The voice inside your head will always be with you. It can be your harshest critic or your greatest coach, but in the end, it is you who decides which role it will play. Over the course of 21 days, by choosing intentional self-talk, by grounding your words in honesty, compassion, and encouragement, by replacing the critic with the coach, and by practicing daily questions and affirmations, you begin to rewire the way you think, the way you act, and ultimately, the way you live. Transformation does not come from a single moment of inspiration. It comes from small, consistent choices repeated over time until they become part of who you are. 3 weeks is enough to begin this shift. It is enough to prove to yourself that you have the power to direct your own inner dialogue, and through that, your own destiny. The challenge is simple for 21 days. Talk to yourself in a way that builds you instead of breaking you. If you do, you will not just complete a challenge, you will start creating a life led by clarity, confidence, and purpose.